Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good morning to all. The Honourable Professor Technologist Dr. Hajah Roziah Muhammad Jano, Vice Chancellor, Universiti Teknologi MARA, Professor T.S. Dr. Muhammad Nazib Suratman, Advisor for iBIOSDG 2021, Professor Surveyor Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Latif, Director of IBSD and Chairman of iBIOSDG 2021, esteemed iBIOSDG 2021 committee members and partners, iBIOSDG 2021 participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the inaugural International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, iBIOSDG 2021. This conference is proudly organized by the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, Universiti Teknologi MARA, UiTM, Malaysia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nur Azza Abdul Aziz, your MC for today. And on behalf of the conference organizers, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. We appreciate your support and commitment to the conference and most importantly, the conference agenda, which is to provide a forum for academia, government, SDGs advocates, and the private sector to come together to share practical solutions to achieve the 17 SDGs. We hope you will find the presentations we have lined up for you to be fruitful and engaging. So to kick off this morning's program, please allow me to run the conference agenda for the next 2 days through you. You can also access the itinerary for the event on the conference website. So just now we started the process. We will be listening to the welcome remark from the chair of the conference, Professor Surveyor Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Latif. This will be followed by the welcome remark given by the Director General of the Jabatan Perlindungan Hidupan Liar and Taman Negara, or its English name, the Department of Wildlife and National Parks Peninsular Malaysia, acronymed as Perhilitan, Dato Abdul Kadir bin Abu Hashim. For your information, Perhilitan, alongside the Forest Reserve Institute Malaysia, FRIM, is one of the main supporters for this conference. After welcoming remarks, we will listen to UiTM's Vice Chancellors, Professor T.S. Dr. Hajah Roziah Muhammad Jano's pre-recorded officiating speech, followed by the screening of a montage prepared by the organizers. After the montage, we'll have the honor of listening to our plenary speaker, Prof. Research Center. For our second keynote speaker, we are delighted to have Dr. Alex Opoku, Associate Professor at the University of Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. So we will break for lunch at 12:30 p.m. and come back to join the parallel session at 2 p.m. until 4:45 p.m. So that's the agenda for today. For tomorrow, we begin at 8:30 a.m. with the keynote speaker, the Honourable Professor Dato Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin Abdullah, FASC, from the Institute of Tropical Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, Universiti Malaysia, Terengganu. This will be followed by our fourth keynote speaker, Mr. Greg Kubiani, the Chairman of Marriott Malaysia Business Council General Manager, the Westin Kuala Lumpur. The parallel session continues after the keynote and we will break for lunch and prayers at 12:50 p.m. At 2 p.m., we will come back and continue with the parallel session until 4:30 p.m., where a closing ceremony will mark the conclusion of the conference. So that is the outline for the 2-day iBIOSDG conference. The schedule for the parallel sessions is available on our website. If you have any inquiries or concerns, please contact our secretariat via the contact details provided in the chat box. Now, without further ado and with much pleasure, I wish to invite Professor Surveyor Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Latif, the chair of the iBIOSDG 2021, to give his welcoming remark. The screen is all yours, Prof.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Nur Azza Abdul Aziz, the Honourable Professor Technologist Dr. Hajah Roziah Muhammad Jano, Vice Chancellor of Universiti Teknologi MARA, the Honourable Dato Abdul Kadir bin Abu Hashim, Director General, Department of Wildlife and National Parks, Peninsular Malaysia, the Honourable Professor Technologist Muhammad Nazib bin Suratman, Advisor to iBIOSDG 2021. Assalamualaikum and very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to welcome all distinguished guests and participants to the first International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development 2021, iBIOSDG 2021. This conference aims to provide a forum for academia, government, SDG advocates, and the private sector to share practical solutions to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The conference basically covers research, design, innovation, and improvisations, which will help to enhance system, methods, and approaches, particularly in sustainable development and biodiversity. Biodiversity matters whether specific species, genes, or ecosystem are of direct interest to human needs. 20 years ago, the degree of scientific uncertainty was high, and action on biodiversity conservation was often justified based on the precautionary principle. Nowadays, while gaps in knowledge still exist, particularly concerning the interlinkages among nature systems, the knowledge base is getting increasingly clear that biodiversity underpins human well-being and livelihoods and is vital to the achievement of most SDGs. Research innovations presented at this conference will be chosen for further enhance the research outcome to a more sustainable future and better use of resources. More than a showcase of the state of the art of creativity and innovation in the research, this conference projects the aspiration and efforts toward achieving the 2030 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This conference is attended by more than 80 participants from abroad as well as local. The Secretariat has received an overwhelming response of technical papers with total more than 90, out of which only 82 were able to be accommodated for the sessions. I would like to take this opportunity to express my heartfelt gratitude to all organizing committee members and those who are involved directly or indirectly in ensuring the success of this conference. Last but not least, on behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to wish all participants a successful conference with fruitful deliberations and networking. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Professor. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Prof. Zul, for the welcoming remark. Prof. Zul is also the Director for the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, Universiti Teknologi MARA, Malaysia, and is the organizer of this conference. For the audience information, this conference is supported by two national agencies, and they are the Department of Wildlife and National Parks Peninsular Malaysia, Perhilitan, and the Forest Research Institute Malaysia, FRIM. We are lucky and honored that one of our supporting partners is able to join us in welcoming the participants of the conference today. It is my pleasure to play the pre-recorded remark from the Honorable Dato Abdul Kadir bin Abu Hashim, the Director General of Perhilitan.
Yang Bersama Dr. Hajar Roziah binti Muhammad Jano, Vice Chancellor Universiti Teknologi MARA. Yang Bersama Profesor Dr. Muhammad Nazib Suratman, Deputy Vice Chancellor Research and Innovation, Universiti Teknologi MARA, cum advisor of the organizing committee. Keynote speakers, Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Abdul Latif Muhammad from Langkawi Research Centre, Professor Datuk Dr. Muhammad Tajuddin Abdullah from the University Malaysia Terengganu, Dr. Alex Opoku from the University of Sharjah, UAE, and Mr. Greg Jugani from the Western Kuala Lumpur. Gentlemen, ladies, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning. Firstly, I would like to say my highest appreciation to the organizing committee to say a few words today. It is truly an honor for Perhilitan to collaborate with the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, Universiti Teknologi MARA, along with the Forestry Department of Peninsular Malaysia and Forest Research Institute Malaysia, FRIM, for the first International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development 2021, happening these 2 days. I was made to understand there is a total of 100 papers being presented today, which involves those research students either pursuing masters, PhD, and experienced researchers as well. Some of the papers presented will be presented according to the 6 breakout groups as determined by the organizing committee. Personally, out of the 6 breakout groups, I look forward to these groups entitled Forest, Protected Area and Biodiversity, Local Community, Financing and Economy, and also Ecotourism, as they feature the research conducted on wildlife species and protected areas under the purview of Perhimpunan. Their findings could also assist and act as a reference for Perhimpunan in managing our wildlife and protected areas. However, it is also interesting to note that there is a paper on the overview of achievements under Sustainable Development Goals from the perspective of use, and this paper, I believe, could assist the government in the implementation of SDG goals. I would also like to take this opportunity to extend my invitation to Universiti Teknologi MARA, as well as the researchers involved in this webinar, to collaborate together with the Department of Wildlife in producing publications under the Fauna of Malaysia series. I believe the outcome of this webinar should be documented either as a proceeding, coffee table book, or corporate video, as this information is vital for all. At the same time, with this new information gathered, it can also be used to assist in future planning, management, and public awareness. Last but not least, I wish the participants of this first International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development 2021 a fruitful discussion. So enjoy your day. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dato, for the short but meaningful opening remark. On behalf of the organizers, I relay our deep gratitude for your support to the conference and your department's effort and commitment to the conservation of our wildlife and national parks. Next, to officiate the ceremony, we will listen to the message from our newly appointed Vice-Chancellor, but no stranger to UiTM, Professor T.S. Dr. Hajar Roziah Muhammad Jano. She is a strong supporter and driver for UiTM's SDG initiatives, and this is evident in the message she is sharing with us today. Without further ado, let's listen to her officiating speech.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning. I bid to Professor Technologies Dr. Muhammad Nazib Suratman, Advisor for iBIOSDG 2021, Professor Surveyor Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Latif, Director of IBSD and Chairman of iBIOSDG 2021, esteemed iBIOSDG 2021 committee members and partners, iBIOSDG 2021 participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let us extend our gratitude to Almighty Allah for blessing us with health and time to be part of this inaugural International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, in short, iBIOSDG 2021. Organized by the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, Universiti Teknologi MARA, UiTM. Ladies and gentlemen, issues on sustainability have become a prominent agenda for various stakeholders from all corners of the world. Every layer of society, regardless of background, realizes that due importance and priority must be given to maintain a sustainable lifestyle and ensure the well-being and survival of the current and next generation. As one of the leading universities in Malaysia, we at UiTM are acutely aware of our crucial responsibility as an educational institution responsible for disseminating knowledge related to sustainability. This responsibility is carried out through our teaching and learning, awareness campaigns, research and innovations to ensure that environmental challenges and sustainability issues are dealt with in the best possible manner. Since its first establishment as a training institute in 1956, UiTM has rapidly expanded into the mega university it is now. We are the largest university in Malaysia with close to 180,000 student enrollment and approximately 18,000 academic and non-academic staff to support our operations throughout the country. With this advantage, we are committed to using our resources to play a significant role in driving and supporting sustainability agendas by generating new knowledge in related fields such as science and technology and proposing policies that can shape a sustainable environment for future generations. The establishment of the Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, IBSD, is one of UiTM's most proud milestones that signify our commitment to providing a suitable platform for our campus, community, alumni, and stakeholders. The iBIOSDG 2021 conference is one of the main performance indicators that stem from IBSD's establishment. This conference provides a supportive and conducive avenue for furthering sustainability-related research and innovation, academic and networking endeavors, and opportunities to participate in community activities targeted to preserve our beloved environment. Biodiversity in the 21st century, transformation in biological diversity and science in support of sustainable development goals is indeed an apt conference theme that has received positive responses with more than 80 entries from around the world. This clearly shows that the objective of this program, which is to provide a forum for academia, government, the private sector, and SDG advocates to come together to share practical solutions to achieve the 17 SDGs, is relevant and coincide with the momentum of sustainability-related awareness currently happening around the world. In closing, I hope that the iBIOSDG conference will be the primary choice for participants to share their research, designs, innovations, and improvements that could help enhance approaches and methods to improving sustainable development and biodiversity. With everyone's commitment and continuous support of the 17 SDGs outlined by the United Nations, we will have a brighter, sustainable future. On that note, and in the name of Allah, most beneficent, most merciful, I hereby officiate the first International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, iBIOSDG 2021. With that, I thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Our heartfelt thank you goes to Professor Rozia for the support and trustiness and in this conference as a platform for furthering sustainability-related research and innovation and promoting academic and community networking endeavors. Let's take a short break and enjoy the montage especially prepared by the organizers before moving on to the plenary and keynote speakers. Welcome back, everyone, and I hope all of you enjoyed the montage just now just as much as I did. Now, moving on to the next agenda, we have for you our esteemed plenary speaker, who is also the advisor for this conference, Professor T.S. Dr. Muhammad Nazib Suratman. We wish to thank Professor Muhammad Nazib for making time to be with us today, and it is our pleasure to have you speaking live to the audience in this WebEx platform with a plenary speech titled Loss of Biodiversity. Why is it a concern? So a gentle reminder to the audience before we begin, kindly ensure that your microphones are muted to avoid from any disturbances throughout this session. Thank you. The stage is all yours, Prof.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can anyone hear me, everyone?
Loud and clear, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to speak in the plenary session this morning. And yang berbahagia Professor Dr. Zulkifli Abdul Latif, the Director of Institute for Biodiversity and Sustainable Development and the Chairman for the International Conference on Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, iBIOSDG, SDG 2021. Yang berbahagia Professor Emeritus Datuk Dr. Abdul Latif Muhammad, the keynote speaker, and the rest of the committee members of the conference. Thank you very much for organizing this auspicious event. I'm glad and I'm very honored to be invited actually to be in the plenary session this morning, and I would like to share something about some lesson learned from about the loss of biodiversity globally, and why is it a concern? So to kick off the session, I would like to start my presentation. For a start, by looking 100 years ago, the world 100 years ago was very different from today, where the populations was about 1.7 billion then, and the life expectancy was in the 40s. More than 60% of the world populations live in the extreme poverty. In the preceding 4 decades, more than 50 million people had died from an extreme scarcity of food. We have made incredible strides over the last 100 years, and even more during the past 25 years. Global average life expectancy is now over 70. We made more gain in life expectancy over the last 4 generations than we did over the last 8,000 generations. From 1990 to 2015, we were able to reduce the number of people in extreme poverty by half and lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty. Yes, we made incredible strides in our lifetime, but the gain of the 20th century can largely be the expense of the environment with grave consequences. Today, we face unprecedented challenges in nature, climate, and human development. We know that rising greenhouse gases will put us on track to 3 degrees Celsius by the year 2100. Within the next 10 years, elephant may extinct in the wild. Land degradations, depletions, and contaminations occur more than half of the world land surfaces. Loss of forest cover and intactness, mangroves, and wetlands drive climate change even faster. We are facing crises in water quality, contaminations in scale, affecting 2 out of 5 people around the globe. We are seeing natural disasters increasing in scale, scope, magnitude, and impact. We are seeing our global agriculture system become less diverse, less resilient, more at risk. And there is wholesale collapse in marine ecosystem of reefs and fisheries. Plastics and microplastic pollution threatens our air, our soil, our water, and our oceans. We are seeing erosions of indigenous land rights, poor governance, inequality increasing. In addition to thinking about the environmental cost of development, we also have asked about the social and economic cost. We must ask who has prospered and who hasn't. Let's imagine if the world were a village of 100 people. 11 would suffer from hunger and malnutrition, 10 would live in extreme poverty, 80 would live under $10 a day, and 20 under $5 a day, 21 would lack of electricity, 10 would lack access to clean water, and 1% owns more wealth than more than half of the entire village combined. To tackle these challenges, the world agreed to an ambitious set of goals, the 2030 Agenda, or Sustainable Development Goals, SDG. And 2 of these goals focus on nature. Goal number 14 focuses on marine pollutions, coastal management, fisheries, oceans, and marine protection, and other issues. This is life below water. Life on land, goal number 15, addresses on conservations, restorations, protections, and sustainable use of terrestrial and freshwater ecosystem, protections of threatened species, tackling wildlife poaching, and many other issues. The Sustainable Development Goals also tackle a wide range of our societal aspirations, including eradicating of extreme poverty, ending hunger, ensuring good health, providing quality education for everyone, promoting gender equality, providing clean water and sanitation, ensuring access to clean, affordable energy, reduce inequality, sustainable cities, sustainable production and consumptions, and peace and partnerships. Despite this global commitment, these agreements that the world has made to the specific biodiversity target, we are losing battle on biodiversity, where we have lost 10% of wilderness in 20 years. We have lost nearly 60% of more than 3,000 species between 1970 and 2001. We are losing up to 75% of insects. By 2020, we will have more plastic in the oceans than the fish. Globally, fisheries are 20% are either fully overexploited or have collapsed altogether. Every year, we lose 50,000 elephants to poaching, 18 million hectares of rainforest to logging, and an estimated 50,000 species. I would like to give examples on how nature underpins the Sustainable Development Goals. The first is about forests. If we think about forests around the world, it sustains 1.6 billion people around the world, which depend mostly rural poor. We think about forests and water, 5.5 billion people around the world depend on forests for their drinking water. Without forests, we do not have a chance of having a glass of cold water to drink. Forest provides primary medicines for 4 billion people worldwide. Forests also play a more critical role these days. It absorbs more than a third of our greenhouse gases. We think about agriculture, especially agrobiodiversity. Agriculture sustains more than 1 billion livelihoods, mostly rural poor. It is foundations of our food security, at least terrestrial-based food security. Agrobiodiversity, in the form of agroforestry, agro-silvicultural, and diverse agriculture systems, could improve the lives of billion people who are malnourished. And agriculture can provide climate mitigations and adaptation solutions. So there's the world as we are today. If we look at 2050, we look ahead and we see population growth close to 10 billion people. We see food demand increasing somewhere reaching about 45% of an increased demand for meat, which drive deforestation. As we see a sharp increase, and also we see a sharp increase in water demand by 2050. Let's look at the threats to biodiversity. Referring to the figure, it shows that the link between biodiversity loss and its drivers, which are divided into direct and indirect drivers. The width of arrows indicate the magnitude of the drivers. Habitat change has been identified as the main factor that directly drives the loss of biodiversity. Let's look at some lessons learned and case studies related to biodiversity. For the past 4 decades, the global temperature has increased close to 2 degrees Celsius warmer than the average. 3 main factors contribute to the climate change, which include carbon emissions, deforestation, and other land use changes due to anthropogenic activities. If we take a closer look, this is the Amazon by 2050. We'll have 20 million kilometers of new roads. By 2030, we know that food demand will increase. By 2050, the average patch size will increase from 17 hectares, where it is today, to quarter hectares. And that means we are fast approaching critical climate tipping points. Once the forest is fragmented, it no longer sequesters carbon, but actually emits greenhouse gases. Forest fragmentation has been identified as a major threat to the conservation and the maintenance of biodiversity. Fortunately, recently there has been an increasing demand that fragmented forests should be reconnected. The Malaysian government called for a national effort to reinstate the connectivity of fragmented forests under the Central Forest Pine, CFS, to protect forest biodiversity, especially providing wildlife corridors and protecting threatened species. A case study was conducted to perform land use change detections analysis at the landscape level, which involved an acquisition of time series of Landsat image. The study was conducted in 3 districts in Selangor, which include Kuala Langat, Sepang, and Petaling. This is the raw image of the study area acquired in 1989, 1993, 1999. During the analysis, the individual classifications of multi-temporal image has resulted in land use covers classes. From the visual observation, the classified image clearly shows the progression of change for all land use and cover. It is clear that the reduction in the forest area indicated in purple in the map can be seen in both intervals. The new establishment of water bodies, clear area, and urban in 1999, which refers to the figure C 1999, is the city of Putrajaya. It was established during that year in the expanse of rubber and oil palm plantations. And the change statistics that extracted from the classified image show that the decrease in forest area. In contrast, there were sharp increases in water bodies, cleared area, and urban during the observation years. Despite the importance of mangrove in offering high economics and ecological values, they are disappearing at the global loss rate at 2% per year, and the loss reached 35% during the last 20 years. A similar study, a land use change study, was conducted to evaluate the extent of mangrove loss in Pulau Indah, Selangor. The loss of mangrove cover, as indicated in green color in the map, were recorded at 14% and 2% during the first and the second interval, respectively. Let's now look at another case study on the critically endangered species, growing paddy, Ditrocarpus semivesticis. From the study, it's been found that in 2010, there were 52 trees located in Parit Forest Reserve. This is the area on campus in UiTM Sri Iskandar. However, in 2014, a new data reported that there are only 35 trees left in Malaysia, or probably in the world. From the report, it has been indicated that there's only one population discovered in Peninsular Malaysia, and also it's been reported that the population in Murabahan district in central Kalimantan has gone extinct due to the forest conversion into oil palm. The loss of the species was due to the illegal logging that took place in 2012 in the area. So these are, other than growing paddy, Ditrocarpus semivesticis, there are also other 4 ditrocarps, which include rusak padi, Vatica flavida, Giam melukut, Hopia apiculata, Meranti kepung hantu, Shorea macranta, and Meranti daun besar, Shorea hemsliana. When we study about the conservation status from the IUCN Red List category, it shows that 5 species out of 5 species, 3 are critically endangered, 1 endangered, and 1 vulnerable. In addition, the spatial distribution of 5 endangered species were mapped, as we can see in the right side in the map of the UiTM Perak campus. So the purpose of mapping is to study the distributions of the species, whether they are sparse or they are closely together. We can see that the red dots indicate Shorea hemsliana, the yellow Vatica flavida, the Ditrocarpus semivesticis is indicated in green dots in the map. What about Shorea quentinensis? This is an endemic and critically endangered species that has been reported extinct in 2010. As the name implies, there is one population of the species found in the original habitat in Kuantan, which can be seen in the map. A small dot in the Peninsular Malaysia map as shown in the figure. The good news is the species has fortunately been rediscovered in Besut, Terengganu by a retired forest ranger in 2014. So the location of the species that has been rediscovered is Lata Tembaka Recreational Forest in Plagiat Forest Reserve in Terengganu. To wrap up of my talk today, I would like to share with you that conservation of biodiversity requires concerted efforts. Yes, it can be done by first maintaining the integrity of forests and its ecosystem, conducting more research, scientific research on ex situ conservations of threatened species and establishment of more protected areas, strengthening governance policies and governance that related to the natural resources, joining together government sectors, NGOs, communities, higher educations to one platform, training and capacity building in leadership skill for natural resource managers, and making use of natural and sustainable energy resources, and finally, practicing sustainable agricultural practices. With that, thank you, Madam Chair, and the rest of the audience for your kind attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Prof. Thank you for the insightful sharing, Professor. Oftentimes, we don't realize or take for granted that our livelihood and our lives depends a lot on keeping our biodiversity at a balance. So thank you, Prof, and it is really an honor to have you with us today. So next, we will be hearing from our first keynote speaker, the distinguished Professor Emeritus, Datuk Dr. Abdul Latif bin Muhammad, Research Fellow at the Langkawi Research Centre. Professor Datuk Abdul Latif is a pioneer in the research of plant taxonomy and conservation biology. Being the first Malaysian to graduate with a PhD in higher plant taxonomy, Professor Latif has dedicated his professional life to the study and development of plant taxonomy and biodiversity. His almost 40 years of research on Malaysian flora, plant taxonomy, and biodiversity has led to the advancement of knowledge that includes the understanding of the science of taxonomy and conservation biology, and also the importance, values, and benefits of environmental conservation in Malaysia. Throughout his glorious career, he has received numerous accolades, such as the Malaysian Tory Award for Science and Technology in 1995, the Tokoh Alam Award from the Faculty of Environmental Studies, Universiti Putra Malaysia, UPM, in 2005, the Citra Award from Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, UKM, also in 2005, the Langkawi Award in 2004, and the prestigious Merdeka Award in 2015. So here's a fun fact about Professor Latif. He has named 1 new genus of plant, 18 plant species new to science, which names I dare not pronounce for fear my tongue may get twisted. And he also has 7 plants and 2 animals named in honor of him. We are beyond delighted to have you as our speaker, Professor. And without delay, let's hear our first keynote speaker speech titled Mainstreaming Biodiversity Conservation and Management in Support of Sustainable Development Goals. The floor is yours, Professor.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Prof.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam sejahtera. Selamat pagi. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I am fully honored to be invited by your university to share my keynote address in a few seconds' time. And more so, I'm so pleased that my good friend, Professor Muhammad Nazir, spoke before me, giving a very excellent background setting to what I'm going to say. He has touched a wide range of issues affecting life on Earth, and he came closer to home to discuss the case study of 5 species of dipterocarps in your campus, which, of course, I'm very aware of such things because my student revised Vatica. So this morning, are you manning my slide from the other end? Hello?
Hello, Prof.
Yeah.
Hang on, yeah.
Good
Let me
point,
just.
point.
All right, let me just confirm with the technical team, yeah?
Because I do not know how to handle from my side. Oh, yes. Okay. When Dr. Asmida invite or her rather text me of your invitation, I purposely chose this topic of mainstreaming biodiversity conservation simply because I believe strongly that in order to achieve something in SDG, which Prof. Muhammad Nazir had already showed you, we have no choice for our beautiful country. We have got to mainstream this idea to the ground. And I will deal with this in short time. Can you go to the next slide, please? So I will go and give you boredom this morning by going through, the biodiversity that we all know. And I will touch about our policy relating to SDG, which Professor Muhammad Nazir already touched. But I will go into something more important to all of us, especially UiTM and other universities, with regard to strengthening and enhancing human resources. The very scientists who are going to address this mainstreaming in our country. And I'll go with you the old issue of strengthening institutional capacity, because UiTM promised to do so many things, but without human resources, without your institution strengthened and other universities in the country, I think it will be all talks. And we have been talking long enough on this issue, And I think Professor Nazir had already touched with respect to conservation and utilization, in particular, addressing the food security issue. And I'll touch at last, how do we mainstream SDGs to the very roots? Next, please. As I said just now, I think Professor Nazir is aware, we have been saying too much about our country being one of the mega biodiverse in the world. We using our hand, using our chest to show that we are rich. Yes, the whole world recognizes we are rich. And also we pay a lot of lip services. Academic like me and you are becoming like politicians, giving lip services, giving promises, biodiversity can do this, can do that. And we have been telling the people in the know, the politicians, so much can be derived in economic terms, in terms of environment, in terms of business on biodiversity. And I must say, currently, I'm quite happy with conservation effort done in the country. But as what Professor Muhammad Nazir said just now, there were losses everywhere. The loss that we cannot see is in fact the genetic diversity. We can't see that. We can see ecosystem losses, as Professor Muhammad Nazir showed in our part of the world, in Kuala Selangor and in Brazil. We could see that either by our eyes or by looking at the maps as shown. And when ecosystems are lost, the species, the flora and the fauna went with them. That sometimes we can see, sometimes we couldn't see, because, you know, if you study plant, you could see. If you study insect, you couldn't see. But if you don't study invertebrate, you can't see. But more important to me is that the genetic diversity, you can't see that. All you can tell academically, genetic erosion is occurring. And I am very emotional about this because I believe our species and our genetic material are the backbone, are the keystone to biotechnology, which we are going to address in the next few years. And these are also the keystone and the backbone for our environmental health. And to my mind, both the species loss and genetic loss have been underestimated. Next, please. Yes, we have been going through tremendous socioeconomic development, and now we are moving to the 12th Malaysia Plan. We wanted to achieve Vision 2020. We failed miserably, and now we move our goalpost possibly to 2040, to 2050. By then, I'll be gone. I'm not worried at all, you know. But what I'm saying is that we have failed in our Vision 2020. But we have put in place two important things to our country and to all of us: the biodiversity policy and the biotech policy. We promised so much, you know, and I still believe that biodiversity is for what? I think, as Professor Muhammad Nazir says now, is for, to my mind, for biotechnology development and also for our environmental health. Next, please. I mean, Professor Muhammad Nazir had already said this. Basically, when I taught my students, I always recognize at three levels only, as I said just now: the ecosystem or community diversity, the species contained within each ecosystem, and the genetic diversity contained in every species. And the interrelatedness is very important. It's inclusivity. You know, genetics material are found in every species, and the species, flora and fauna, are found in ecosystem. Next, please. Just to, you know, create interesting, this is just a basic for in Sabah. Next, please. Just to give you beautiful pictures of our ecosystem. The one on the left is Danau Valley. The one on the right, top, Maliau Basin, and the one down there is close to your Kuala Kenyam in Taman Negara, your field station, Taman Negara. Next, please. Just to reiterate this boring slide, as I call it, you know, we try to put down numbers of what we know. And you notice that there are so many zeros at the back. In other words, we don't know exactly what we have, especially the microbes. You know, the big one we know. I put down there is 286 for Peninsular Malaysia. You can argue with that. Some people say it's 302 because a few bats have been newly described, and one is waiting to be described, automox. Next, please. Another boring slide, which you all knew, is what Professor Muhammad Nazir reiterated strongly just now, that of our ecosystem services, which are given free, nobody pays for this. On the right-hand side, not free, because, the wood products, we got to pay so much. And something which are close to our heart is the social and aesthetic benefit, especially us being academics and researchers. This has no value at all in the eyes of economists sometimes. Next, please. I simply wanted to put this beautiful picture is to reiterate what a diversity is all about. I think some of you may have seen this picture up in time. The idea is to show you a fraction of our richness. You go to the market, especially for those from Kota Baru, you go to the wet market, Siti Khadijah in Kota Baru, you see this everywhere. You go to Sabah and Sarawak, you see this everywhere. This is what I consider our richness and our hopes. Next, please. As I said just now, we've got a good policy, beautifully written, and we have just revised it for the next 2016, 2025, and now it's 2021. We have done not much yet, but you look at the one in the middle. We promised in 1998 to utilize our biodiversity in a sustainable manner. Next, please. We have beautiful principles, 11 of them. You can read them, all inclusive. Beautiful. Next, please. Every principle have objectives, equally beautiful. I don't deny this. Next, please. Every objective, are so well defined, are so well promised. You look at down there, biosafety, you look at everywhere there, you can see so many things that as a university, as a kementerian, so much can be achieved. Next, please. And every strategy has 3 to 11 action plans. Just action plan, action plan, action plan. But question been asked 20 years ago. What agency is responsible for this? Nobody dares to answer. Though we know it is the kementerian. But kementerian has been changed a couple of times with regard to their portfolios. And then we ask another question. Where is the money coming from? You ask the finance minister, who always spoke in billions, but nothing filtered down to the ground. Next, please. We've got a beautiful biotech policy launched by none other than Dr. Ahmad Badawi, 2005, 16 years ago. Now, you tell me, what are the achievements of this biotechnology policy on the ground, not on paper? Next, please. Well, we promised so much. The Prime Minister chaired one high-level committee, National Biodiversity and Biotech, and because of politics, no Prime Minister has addressed this. And we promised to do so much about National Biodiversity Institute and even Natural History Museum. But I must say, Sarawak Biodiversity Center and Sabah Biodiversity Center are in front from other states. And all this, to my mind, has done so much. It augurs very well for our policies. Next, please. As I said just now, implementation is our weakness to the power of 10. You take any government department, you take any institute, our implementation is the weakest. I don't know why implementation has been made so difficult. We have promised to establish Center of Excellence. We have promised so much. Next, please. Well, Professor Muhammad Nazir dare not put this picture as one of the main drivers to biodiversity loss. But this was 20, 30 years ago. I think picture like this is gone. This picture was taken in Sabah, mind you. Next, please. But this is still happening, you know, not so much to oil palm and rubber plantation anymore, but lately something happened in Perak and Kedah for durian musang king. You know, thousands and thousands of hectares have been converted to forest plantation. I'm not saying this is bad, but I'm just putting for argument's sake, you know. Next, please. Yes, I just wanted to put this back. Professor Muhammad Nazik already put it. Regarding the very theme of this symposium try to address is how do we transform our biodiversity into sustainable development? And Prof. Nazik already pointed out there are two goals which are so relevant for us, the 14 and the 15. And there's so many targets. My belief is that we don't have to go through or we don't have to do all the 17 goals. Every department, every university, every individual look at what is doable, achievable, attainable. And with regard to target, likewise, we cannot be overly ambitious. Let's do all, but let's choose what we can do and let's divide the target, the goal and the target between all the stakeholders. Don't do it alone. We must do in consortium. Next, please. All right, we have been discussing the goal, and I was very happy. A few years ago, a minister launched this, I think in one of the hotels. And the minister, I don't want to mention his name, you all knew him, promised so much to really mainstream SDG. But after 3 years, being minister, he changed portfolio, and I don't know who is taking this. So many of us in the universities, in private sectors, had already internalized thinking what we can do, what we cannot do. We are thinking of the goal and we are thinking of the target which are relevant and doable. But have we been able to mainstream this to the grassroots, to where it matters? Not at the federal level, not at the ministerial level, but to all the states in Malaysia, from Perlis right down to Johor, go by the East Coast Highway to Kelantan, swim across the South China Sea to Sabah and Sarawak. Because biodiversity is a state matter. The species, the animal, the plant, the insect, the water, the land, you name it, they all belong to every state in Malaysia. The minister can shout, can lament, can do anything, but it is up to the state chief minister or Menteri Besar, the ESCO, the state EPU, to do on the ground. This is very important in mainstreaming. Next, please. Yes, as I said, Sarawak, to my mind, has gone so in front in this issue using Sarawak Biodiversity Center. I think you can go to visit SBC in Kuching, or you can even go to the website, Google it. Sabah has done tremendous job, but I'm just thinking, what about the other state in Peninsula, from Perlis to Johor to Kelantan again? Have we got this facility? No. Has the chief minister and the Menteri Besar and the state APU thinking about it? No, because they don't have two things. One, is the human resources. Two, they don't have the money, the real, not the ringgit. Because in Kelantan, we don't use ringgit, we use real. And Perlis, they need ringgit. In order to position researchers, to position our graduates in every state to do what I consider addressing biod, addressing ecosystem losses, addressing species, flora and fauna in every state, addressing, the genetic erosion in every state. That's what matters. Just now, Professor Muhammad Nazir was talking about the 5 species which are so restricted in distribution in Perak. We don't expect Terengganu to do this. We expect Perak to address this issue because the population has so decreased so much over the years. And as Professor Muhammad Nazir was saying, with regard to Suria flavida and also Diplocarpus semivestitis, they are found only behind your kitchen, behind your campus in Perak. And just now, Professor Muhammad Nazir was saying about Suria continensis. It was found, the population was on Bukit Goh in Kuantan, turned to Kelapa Sawit punya estate. Luckily, Ranger Saleh found it in Lata Tembaka and Terengganu, and Jabatan Pertanian had already collected the seed, and now you have got 1,000 over seedlings in nursery Calok in Terengganu. Now, what do? Disperse them. Suria continensis, let them survive, let them be not restricted to 3 stands in Lata Tembaka at present. This is what I call mainstreaming. The state can do so much. Next, please. All right. Research Institute. For the last few years, PRIM, even IMR, even MARDI, and other research institutes are suffering from budget constraint. Sad. But all is not lost. I think these 3 institutes and other institutes are addressing biodiversity and conservation. PRIM with their forest, IMR with their ectoparasites, and all the fauna related to tropical medicine, and MADI addressing ex situ conservation and microbial collection and also rare species. Now, I'm looking also at the universities because we have got 20 public universities. We are teachers, we are also researchers, and we are also movers to addressing SDGs. And I think universities like yours, I haven't got any university now, can really address this. The reason I raise this because every state in Malaysia now has got universities. Many, only 1 university, a few with 2 universities, the public one, I'm saying, and even Selangor, Kuala Lumpur has many. I think we can do wonders to address this on the ground in every state because we are the stakeholders. UMK is a stakeholder in Kelantan. UMT and UNISA are stakeholders in Terengganu, and the list can go on. Next, please. Yes, human resources. Tun Abdullah Hamad Badawi promised beautifully. I saluted him. He wanted to address 2 agendas when he was the Prime Minister: to develop human resource capacity. The number of scientists, the number of biologists, botanists, taxonomists must be increased to address our rich natural resources. He said that in his maiden speech. And also, he promised to strengthen institutional capacity, the RIs I mentioned just now, and also the universities. But when he retired, what happened? I don't have to tell you, you all knew when he retired, almost 10 years ago? What happened? I think no other prime minister, we have 4 so far, had revisited these 2 issues, which are so important, to all of us, the human resources and the institutional strengthening. Next, please. Yes, I believe in this. We have trained so many masters and PhDs, and we can retrain this if need be to divert their so-called specialization when they were doing masters and their PhDs. We can retrain them in something that we want them to be to address these issues. And I'm very sure many of our master's graduate and PhD graduates are willing to be retrained. When I was doing my PhD, there was no molecular biology or DNA sequencing. But now, molecular biology is the tool. Genetic engineering is another tool to realize our biotech policies. Now, where are our biotechnologists per se? And to this note, I'm very happy when pandemic 19 came into our shores and our minutes, at least government poured some money into the vaccine production. And I think there are a couple of RIs, university researchers, professors have gone into attempting to produce Malaysian-made vaccine modified from the existing one. But that is what I call reactive, which is good, a reactive response. But what I'm talking about is that something which are so dear to our mind, we must have reacted 20 years ago to address what Professor Muhammad Nazir was has presented just now. Next, please. Again, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, all the developed countries, I must say, have got the critical mass in any number of disciplines. You look at our country, you list down the number of scientists for 100,000 population. Just now, Professor Muhammad Nazir was assuming if the world is a village of 100 people, how many scientists are there? Professor Nazir did not stipulate. I think he can put it 0. So we have about 20 million population. How many hardcore scientists are there? How many biologists? How many taxonomies? How many, and the list can go on. In other words, on the ground, we are lacking scientific awareness, and we are lacking awareness also in our industries. Why did I say this? Why do I say this? Because we promised ourselves to be an industrialized country by 2020, by last year. And we promised, at least one prime minister promised, that we are going to be the high income nation. We promised. We need technology, we need scientists, we need engineers. What have we gone wrong in trying to realize this vision? Next, please. Well, everybody has a role. Institutions have a role. NGOs have a role. And private sectors have a role. Everybody have a role. But then again, I strongly believe that the initiatives are not heading the way we wish because of financial constraints. And that I realize because our country is facing debts, hutang, in billions. And look at our last budget. How much money is streamed into environment? How much will go into the BioD? How much will go into research institutes, and also universities? Everybody is facing this dilemma. Next, please. Yes, we were in the right footing put by the British years ago. The British established all the RIs, and after independence, we established 20 public universities and hundreds of private universities. We have been trained in various, but I must say in the last 2 decades, we have lost our mission. We have lost our vision due to a couple of reasons that I have already spoken and just now, and I think you can share this. We have lost our passion, our drive to move forward in this space. And it is unfortunate. And I think it's due to our political climate and also due to our budgeting. Next, please. Well, we can approach BioD in many ways. Some people address BioD and IT. Good. Some people would like to address BioD and business. Good. Using our local material, to create crude businesses, crude product. Even people have addressed BioD with ecotourism, especially, nature tourism that can bring foreign money to Langkawi, to Pulau Tioman, to Sabah, to Sarawak. And BioD is linked to even pharmacy. What interested me is BioD must be linked strongly with conservation. Next, please. I brought this forward because Singapore is using our species in floriculture to export cut flowers, orchids, tons and tons every day. Why can't Johor, Perak, Pahang do floriculture on orchids and assemble 747 daily at Subang Airport and KLIA Airport, sending cut flowers of orchid to Europe and America? Why is Singapore exploiting our resources? I cannot blame them because they have got vision to make money using floriculture. But then again, where are our floriculturists? Next, please. Likewise, if you want to see Nepenthes, you go to the forest. That's jolly good. But if I don't want to go to the forest, where do I go to see all the Nepenthes? Yes, I have got to fly to Berlin. They have got more than 120 species of Nepenthes in the whole world. Okay, Berlin is very far. I can fly to Canberra. They have got, I think, more than 150 species of Nepenthes of the world. After all, in the whole world, we have only 184 of Nepenthes species only. 2 years ago, or rather the last 2 years, my team, my group with MADI and UPM had just described 3 new species of Nepenthes from Terengganu. So why can't Terengganu, being the stakeholder, being the owner of BioD in Terengganu, make hybrids of this species and sell by online business? It makes money. Borneo or Sabah and Sarawak is the center of species diversity. So is Peninsula Malaysia. Why can't we capitalize on this? Why must Berlin and Canberra are the 2, I would say, custodian of all the species in the world? Next, please. Likewise, we are in the university. I did this once, and I think you are in the position to do this. We have got to address these issues to our graduates. Going into floriculture, going into horticulture, going into semi-business for our economic development. Because we have got the capital, our natural resources, our species. Let us use our human capital with some, I would say, business capital, money capital to address this. And I'm saying this because this is the only way forward to mainstream BioD in SDGs. Next, please. Well, I always believe, our traditional medicine is so rich in our Malay tradition, in our Chinese tradition, in our Indian tradition, not to mention the Orang Asli and the Orang Asal Pribumi. SBC in Kuching is addressing this. Why can't we do this to produce crude product for our market and for our regional market? If Germany can do this, why can't we? Next, please. Well, the state has got the jurisdiction to address the fate of all the ecosystem in every state. Every patch of forest, every river, every water bodies in the state is responsible. The EPUs is responsible. But they don't have ecologists in EPUs. They don't have biologists in EPUs because they don't have the money to pay them. And it is not their priority even to have scientists in their EPUs to address this issue. And this is something that we have got to change. Let us speak to all the Menteri Besar and Chief Minister to have ecologists and biologists in their state EPUs to understand the natural resources, to understand BioD and SDGs in their state. Likewise, only ecologists and taxonomies can address the fate of species diversity in every state. This is very important. And the state with the rich orchids like Pahang, Perak, even Selangor, can in Johor, can go into floriculture, can go into horticulture to produce, material and plantlet for the industries. You cannot expect the ministers to do all this. You cannot expect the politicians to address this. We can expect academics, people who are, I would say, trained enough to tell the state EPUs, this is for the good of each state. In lieu, the logs are becoming depleted, or the minerals are becoming depleted, the petroleum are becoming depleted. So we have got to go for sustainable agriculture, sustainable forestry, sustainable biodiversity utilization. Next, please. Well, I believe all states now, from Perlis to Johor to Kelantan, must have their centers of excellence modeling those in Sarawak and Sabah in order to address BioD and SDGs in every state. And I believe every state EPUs must strengthen the framework of universities and colleges in their own state. They must hire new graduates in respective discipline who have the skills and the capabilities. And GPA must understand this predicament. And in this way, I believe biodiversity conservation can be incorporated in state economic activities, in state EPUs. And of course, every state has got private sector to participate. And what is more important, I think the power of the masses, the power of the people of the state must demand for this. So the state must implement the existing federal policies, get the ordinance and enactment to the state to mainstream biodiversity utilization and conservation in every state. Next, please. Well, I think knowledge must be sustainably used. And we need to evaluate and assess our human resources and our capabilities in biodiversity and biotech. We need to strengthen ourselves in the universities. We must give opportunities for our graduates. And I must say again, all states must address this. And we have got to, whether we like it or not, we have got to address funding mechanism, which is our weakest point. Because every state or a few states that I talk to, they don't have the money to do this at all. I've spoken to Kelantan, I've spoken to Perlis. They said they don't have the money. They need federal money. And as I said once again, implementation on the ground is our weakest link. And we are to blame. We are to be blamed. You know, we cannot point to anybody ourselves. Next, please. Next, please. Yes, I think that was my last slide. And I must thank very much to the chair, whom I have only viewed on the screen. I have not met the chair, and the excellent committee members for the commitment to address these issues. And to my former student, Associate Professor Dr. Asmida, who, through her, that I got the invitation. And I think my former student also, Dr. Faizah Fardi, in UKM, also extend her hospitality to me and everybody else. Once again, to Professor Muhammad Nazik for giving the setting, the background to my talk. And I think with your global perspective and my state-wise perspective, I think UiTM, with your institute, can spearhead what I consider, together with the ministry concerned, mainstreaming the idea of biodiversity conservation, biodiversity utilization and management linked to SDGs to the stakeholders in every state. The reason I raise this, once again, give me another second. The Vice Chancellor said in her opening speech, you've got the masses, you've got the institution in every state in our land. UKM hasn't got the branch in every state. Only one university, yours, with every, I would say, hands, fingers in every state. And I think you alone, I believe, can do this. Because you can start radiating from UiTM Sekahalam to the one in Segamat, to the one in Macang Kota Baru, to the one in Perlis, to everyone. The idea, take the championship with you. You've got the human resources, you've got the strength of the institute, mainstream this. Otherwise, as Professor Muhammad Nazir said, we may be too late, you know, because our ecosystems are losing our species. The big one, he quoted elephant. You know, I always quoted that I cannot see invertebrates, insects, and the worms that I cannot see due to weedicide and pesticide. And what is more important, the genetic erosion. We just cannot wait. We are so rich with biod. We are the mega biodiversity country. We have got the human resources. We have got some skill and know-how. Let us do it. So with that, I thank you once again to the chair, to the committee, to Dr. Asminda, to Faiza. Assalamualaikum wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. And may Allah bless you, all the academics and the listeners from UiTM and other people on the screen whom I cannot see. I am still wearing mask even though I'm in my bedroom because they say this COVID-19 can penetrate my screen. No, I'm joking. SOP, my dear. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Prof. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Latif, for the sharing of knowledge and also the expertise that I am positive many in this audience found thought-provoking. So I like that you highlighted the importance of grounding the efforts to mainstream SDG down to the root and also strengthening the human capital needed to drive this effort. And I also like the fact that you pointed out there should be no more just lip service, more action on the ground. I think, yeah, it's about time for stakeholders to keep their promises. All right, Prof, since we do have plenty of time, I think, I hope it will be okay for Prof. Latif and also Prof. Nazir for me to open the floor for Q&A. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
All right, wonderful.
If we can answer them.
Wonderful. So participants, excuse me, we will open the floor for Q&A now. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat box or unmute your mic to ask the question directly. But first, let me just read one question that we received in the chat box. This is from Nurul Ain Muhammad Zaki. So she said, thank you, Prof, for the insightful talk. Where are biodiversity hotspots located? Does Malaysia consist of one of them? That's a question.
Yes. As I said just now, depending on which reference you read, we are one of the 17 and we are also one of the 12. In other words, let me take the last one. I think what happened was bodies like IUCN and other global bodies must have done their inventories to look at the number of species, plants and animals, and also to look at the number of endemic species. In other words, species which are found in that particular geographical area. Let's see Malaysia as a geographical entity. And also they look at the species which are under ERT, endemic, rare, and under threat. And they found out that Malaysia, being so small a country, honestly, is one of the 12. Of course, the big one like US, Russia, China, India, Australia, Brazil, Colombia, and those are the big countries fine. But when you look closer at home, we realize that if I take Diplocaceae, balak yang Prof. Nazir sebutkan tadi, di Malaysia, mana Malaysia ni, Malaysia, Filipina, Indonesia sampai ke Papua New Guinea saja ada 267 or 276. It doesn't matter, different of 9 only species, only Diploca. And Malay Peninsula has got 158. So if you just divide by the number of species, with the land area, we find out that with Diploca, Peninsular Malaysia zoom the index 9 because Indonesia is big, less number. Borneo is so big, less number. Thailand is big, but fewer number. But Malay Peninsula is highest, 158 over the land area. So I take the product only. And you can go on with orchid, you can go on with palm, with gingers, with even rafflesia, even with Tismia, you can name it. You can play around with this number to show that there are many species in our land. And the hotspot has always been, if you go, I think if you refer to a document by MNS, I think that it was started by Q Bongkia and I think revised. You will find that we have many hotspots in our own country, not to mention Tamanagara, not to mention Royal Blue State Park, not to mention Krau, not to mention Darompin, and what have you in Sabah and Sarawak. You can refer this, and I think this is in the public domain, and it's plenty. You could, and there are so many references. If you look at the orchid, for example, Professor Rusiago, my former student, had done orchid for Selangor and orchids for Perlis and orchid for Bau area. You find so many species in one small area. And I think you can go to a reference by Dr. Ruski on begonia. You find that so many species are so localized in the rock boulders of Terengganu, rock boulders of Kelantan, and rock boulders in many states. So, and I must point out something called Terengganu Hills. Terengganu Hill means you look at the map. The hill that borders Kelantan and Terengganu dekat Besut, dekat Pasir Putih tu, you slide down to Kenyir, you slide down to Gunung Gagau, down to Kuantan, that is called Terengganu Hill. To my mind, that is somewhere you must go and find. This is the hottest to my mind, that you have access to find hotspot in plant in particular. With animal, I do not know very much because animals are mobile, are mobile. But then again, I would say with animal, Tamanagara is, Royal Balloon is, and Darompin is, and Krau is, together with other Mario Basin, of course, and of course, Ganong Valley and Imbak Canyon in Sabah. Answers your question.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think it does answer Dr. Nurul Ain's question. And it's such interesting numbers that you've given us, and also the locations, particularly Terengganu Hill. Maybe some of the people from those involved in the conference could actually do a trip over to Terengganu Hill just to look out for the plants that Prof has mentioned. Anyway, are there any other questions or anyone in the audience that would like to just ask any questions directly to Professor Latif? You can unmute your mic, say hi, introduce yourself, and then post your questions.
Hi, Dr. Azhar. Can I ask a
Hello.
question?
Yeah, sure. Please do.
Okay. Hi, Prof. Latif. Hope you still remember me, Prof. Latif, and also Prof. Nazib. I just have one question for both of you because I know that you have so much experience actually in conducting all those activities related with SDG. So based on your experience, I know not everyone can understand SDG, and also it is very hard to integrate participation from the state and also to put trust and confidence for the state to university, to academia. So based on your experience, what is the best practice actually that us universities can do to integrate participation and rules from every single party in state, academia, federal, as well as NGO to take part in SDG activities? That is my first question. And my second question, I'm not sure either Prof. Latif or Prof. Nazib, have you been to, when is your last time go to Bera, Tasik Bera? Because Tasik Bera, it is one of the Ramsar site, but the latest DNA profiling, it was conducted in 1994, if I'm not mistaken. And what is your opinion on the biodiversity status in Bera ecosystem? Perhaps it is also contribute to the SDG topic today. That's all from me.
maybe Prof. Nazib want to take the mic.
Yes, thank you, Dato. Thank you, Dr. Faiza, for the questions. I'll take the first question first by sharing our experience in UiTM. Yeah? When we launched our UiTM strategic plan, we call it UiTM 2025. We embed SDG in the strategies, one of the strategies, and we try to, because the intention is to, like Dato mentioned, we try to create partnerships. Yeah, we cannot do it alone. Yeah, so what we have done, we have worked together with other departments, organizations, universities. For example, Perilitan, our long partner in creating field stations so that it will facilitate the researcher from many backgrounds and many departments to join together to conduct research related to SDG. So just Prof. Zul just recently organized scientific expedition with our colleagues from many universities, from UKM, UMT, Universiti Malaya, UPM. You know, we work together towards the common goal. Other than that, when we organized the scientific expedition, we mapped the theme into SDG, which involved the community, you know, the water quality, the flora, fauna, and so forth. And second of all, Dr. Faiza, in order for us to monitor whether the initiative that we conducted, which is, like I said, in line with our strategic plan of the university, we are doing constant monitoring in terms of the progress. We measure them, measure the success, and then as you also involved, that we put the some of the data, some of the achievement and accomplishment into the Times Higher Impact Ranking, yeah, which is the one of the ranking activities that use SDG as an indicator. So not only we can see how SDG in university, by working together with other collaborators nationally, we can measure the success, but also we can see how do we perform in terms of the implementation in when we look at the in comparison with other universities globally. So we know where Malaysia at in terms of implementation of SDG in the universities and create partnerships. Okay? Thank you, Faiza. I hope this answered the question.
If I can add, I like your idea, as if you have formed partnership, or you can call it consortium between UiTM and other university and Perilitan and Jabatan Perhutanan. To answer Dr. Faiza punya question, sorry, my phone made noise. As I said just now, UiTM with your partners and consortium can do a presentation to every state EPU or ESCO for that matter, doing the environmental and natural resources profile. Because every state is so keen to preserve, to conserve their environment, their river, their forest, their flora and fauna. And I think your delegate can go to every state, what I consider like a politician do, to go to every state and have a dialogue with the state EPU, not to tell them what to do, but to tell them what they have got. With respect to the environment health, this is the state of affair. With respect to natural resources, this is the state of affair. With respect to your forestry and with and now linked to the sustainability agenda. You cannot go on living like this. We must think of the future in order your forest to be sustained, your flora to be sustained, your river to be sustained. This is the way forward. And I think UiTM can spearhead this consortium with all the state EPUs. You may start with the smaller one, you can go to the bigger one, but seeing you have got a field station and you have done so much work with Pahang, and I think Pahang could be your starting model to address this issue. We have no choice. We have got to go to the ground to meet the EPUs, to meet the people who are so concerned with your state of affairs. My second response to Dr. Faizah's question with regard to Tasik Bara, I remember very well my former lecturer, Dr. Jose Hurtado. He did a monograph on the water quality and fish fauna and invertebrate fauna of Tasik Bara. A very beautiful monograph that was in the 70s, so 50 years ago. And that monograph is still around. That was a baseline to my mind. But after that, Tasik Bara has gone to be a Ramsar site, not for the water quality, not for invertebrate diversity, but for migrating birds. But in the last 50 years, I have not seen a revisit to the biodiversity of Tasik Bara. Honestly, correct me if I'm wrong. Or if I'm still wrong, can you suggest who has done similar work at Tasik Bara to look at the profile of the environment, natural resources, in particular the fish, fauna, the invertebrate fauna, and water quality? That goes to your next neighbor, Tasik Kini. UKM started doing something very, very well, very fruitful as a baseline data. And what happened last year? The forest has been devastated with mining, and water quality has been impeded, the invertebrate has been impeded, and these are the only two natural water bodies in Peninsular Malaysia, Tasik Bara and Tasik Kini. The others in Kenya and in Temenggong, these are natural water body, artificial water bodies. So, but you can talk to the people concerned. To be honest, Professor Jose Hurtado is still alive. He did that 50 years ago. He's still alive. He must be in the 90s now. He lives in London. He's still in contact with me. But to be honest, I have not seen a similar work to replicate or to revisit or to revise his former monograph on Tasik Bara. Of course, I remember you, Dr. Faizah. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Nazim and Prof. Latif, for answering Dr. Faizah's question. We have another question in the chat box. It's from Saiful Anwar bin Kamarul Hisham. So, Assalamualaikum and hi to all. I'm Saiful, a PhD student from UPM. I would like to ask to Professor Emeritus, Professor Latif and Professor Nazib, what is your thought regarding conservation fund management locally and internationally? Thank you.
Conservation what? Fund?
Conservation fund management.
Yes. When I was at the university, MacArthur Foundation was very active. The one in Sweden, can anybody remember? Something science was very active. JICA was very active. Australian was very active. I must say European Union was active. IUCN has been very active. When I was at university, but to be honest, I can answer this question now because I have left the university for some time. Locally, I have seen a couple of initiatives, one from Habitat in Penang. not big money, around 10 to 20,000. They have given some grant to some researchers to do biod work. I know some of my friends at UKM has got this grant. Even Jabatan Perhutanan Pahang are giving grants, small grant to researchers. Terengganu, I can't remember the body now. I think Museum Terengganu has given some grant, small grant. I hope Professor Nazib can answer this question, because, as I said, I've left the university for some time. I'm not so familiar with the funding, but the institution I mentioned earlier from outside the country has been very active. Not to mention UNDP, not to mention GAF, Waste Frame that capitalized a lot. But I understand from my former student in Mardi, Dr. Muhammad Nur Faisal, even Kew Garden has got a match grant between Kew Garden and Mardi. British Museum has got match grant. To answer your question, Saiful, before I hand over to Nazib, I think you have got to talk to people who are in the know. Sometimes the Kementerian, your Deputy Vice Chancellor in Research, and I think the other source is you ask Mr. Google with respect to funding. Look around, ask around, talk with people. And I mentioned just now Habitat in Penang. I've got contact with them. Even Jabatan Perhutanan Pahang, last week I met them. They were very happy to give small grant for specific studies. I think Terengganu gave some study Rafflesia to Dr. Samsul Kamis of UKM. Small money, but it's better than none, you know. So maybe Prof. Nazib being with the research portfolio knows where to get grant. Nazib.
Thank you, Dato. Thank you, Mr. Apa tadi, Saiful ya?
Saiful, yeah, betul.
Yeah, cool, for asking the question. Perhaps I can share our experience in UiTM when I was the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. I mentioned earlier that we incorporate SDG into our strategic plan. So when we get the SDG into strategic plan, is to come with funding. Yeah. So what our office did is we introduced a grant which we call it SDG Triangle Research Grant. Yeah. The reason we call it triangle because we choose 4 locations of study areas. One is in Pulau Tuba, Pulau Tuba in Langkawi, Pulau Tuba, and Royal Belum, and Taman Negara Pahang, and Taman Negara Gunung Ledang. Apparently, when we connect the dots of the location, it creates triangle. So that's the reason we name it as a SDG triangle at UiTM. So far, we have offered 2 years, 2019 and 2021. Yeah, we allocate 2 million ringgit for that purpose. We encourage collaboration between UiTM researchers with other researchers from other universities and also research institute. Our second experience is to create partnership with 2 other universities in Sabah and Sarawak, UMS and UNIMAS. So each of us, we agree to contribute a matching grant. Yeah, and so you pool the money together. We invite for collaborative research, but it's required to have partnership between the 3 universities. And we named it as SDG Research at Borneo. So in this case, we focus the research theme into Borneo, because in Borneo they have different, challenges, different issues altogether as compared to Peninsular Malaysia. So in terms of the perhaps the society, the community, yeah, and then the diversity of forests in Sarawak and Sabah, yeah. So this is an ongoing project which provide opportunity for researchers to conduct research which use HDG as a research platform. And we also receive some contributions from industry because they would like the funding to be used as a research related to the sustainability. Yeah. For example, we recently received from Maybank Investment Management. So we intend to use the money to study forests in Sungai Rengat, yeah, in Jerantut. It's quite unique because of the presence of Rafflesia. So with the government of Pahang, they would like to promote the area into ecotourism, yeah, working together with the community in Ulu Cheker. Yeah. But other than that, we also our researcher also from time to time we get small grant from, for example, Nagao, Japan, yeah, also from IFS, International Foundation of Science, which is, I think this type of grant is designated for biodiversity research, for SDG and conservation. Yeah, all right. Thank you. That's all from me.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. Latif, and also Prof. Nazib, for your answer. Okay, so actually we do have a few more questions in queue, but since our second keynote speaker is with us now, we will push all questions to the end of the second keynote session for all three panels to respond to. Okay, so thank you very much, Prof. Nazib and Prof. Latif. And before moving on, I would like to first and foremost, on behalf of the organizers, apologize to our next speaker, Dr. Alex, for the ad hoc change of time. I believe there's a 4-hour difference from Malaysia and also where you are, Dr. Alex. Is that true?
Yeah, that's correct.
So it does mean that it's 7 a.m. in the morning on your side, isn't it?
It's even yeah, it's now getting to 7 a.m. yet.
7 a.m. My God, we woke you up a little bit too early today.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fine.
That's all right. I hope you'll be able to grab a cup of coffee in a bit to perk yourself up.
Yeah, I've got a bottle of water here.
Wonderful.
Early morning water.
That's good. Good for your system. So our apologies again, Doctor, and we deeply appreciate your kind consideration and willingness to start earlier than scheduled.
That's fine. That's fine.
All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to officially introduce our next keynote speaker. So today we are very lucky and honored to have our next keynote speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Alex Opoku, who is an expert with extensive experience in quantity surveying and cost management. So currently, he is an associate professor at the University of Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. Dr. Alex holds a PhD in construction and project management from the University of Salford. He is also a fellow of Higher Education Academy UK, Chartered Construction Manager, MCIOB, and a Chartered Quantity Surveyor, MRICS. So his research interest is in the area of sustainable built environment, focusing on the link between sustainable development goals and the built environment. So Dr. Alex has a beautiful teaching philosophy that I would like to share, where he believes in bringing real-life case studies into the classroom to enhance student learning experience. So I'm sure many among the audience are eager to listen to his keynote speech today titled Future Cities and Biodiversity, Leaving No Place Behind in the World We Want. So please join me in welcoming and lending your ears to Dr. Alex Opoku's keynote address. The screen is all yours, Dr. Alex.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That's a wonderful introduction. Okay, let me share my slide. Start from there. Can you see my slides clearly now? Yeah, I believe so.
Yes, Doctor. It's clear.
Okay, thanks so much for the wonderful introduction. Yeah, I've worked in the industry as a quantity surveyor many years before joining academia. So talking about bringing rare cases and industry into classroom, I relate more into things that happen in the construction industry because I started my career as a trainee. So I'm not the typical academic going through maybe a beautiful first class and doing a PhD. I went through even the traditional route in UK. That's what we call the BTech vocational educational route. So I did a more vocational pathway into university, doing BTech in building studies before doing my bachelor's in construction management, moving on to do a master's in quantity surveying and a PhD in construction and project management. So all my academic background from college to PhD has been in construction. Coming back to the message of today, the future cities and biodiversity, which links very well with the conference theme of sustainable development and SDGs. My research interest, though I'm a QS, but I've developed a research interest in sustainable built environment. So all my research has been around sustainable built environment, either looking at economical issues, life cycle costing, environmental issues like biodiversity and cities, or looking at the social issues. So I've done papers on social value, impact of project delivery, what are the social values or the added values in addition to the core project delivery. So my work revolves around the issue of sustainable built environment. And current research over the last few years have focused on, I think since the 2015, the adoption of the SDGs have focused more on the relationship between the built environment and the SDGs. So I'm kind of picking each SDG, components of the SDGs and how the built environment relate to that. And there's the first paper I did in 2015 build up the framework around the role of the built environment in achieving the SDGs. And if you look at that dimension, the built environment has got a huge impact on the realization of the SDG because of the negative impact of the construction sector. And if we're able to turn those negative impacts into opportunities, the built environment can link a number of the SDGs, whether it's climate change, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's education, the built environment has got a role to play. So even addressing goal 4 as education, built environment, we provide infrastructure. So if you don't have classrooms, especially in developing countries, then there's an issue there. So drilling down into the theme today, under the UN principle of the SDGs is to leave no one behind. So the underpinning principle for the UN Sustainable Development Goal is to leave no one behind. But I believe that if we advocate for not leaving anyone behind, then we shouldn't leave any city or any community behind, because cities and communities are inhabited by people. So if we leave cities and communities behind, then we will leave people behind. So the agenda to leave no one behind will never be achieved if we don't move with cities and communities. So that's what I'm looking at. And if we are looking at cities and communities as the anchor, as the underpinning theme, more important aspect is biodiversity. So we need also to put biodiversity as the heart of the city or sustainable city, the smart city, green city agenda, because biodiversity has got a huge impact on the city, green city agenda or the green community agenda that we are looking for. So that's where I'm kind of concentrating or linking the cities, biodiversity, and the SDGs, these 3 topics together. So I start with sustainable built environment, looking at the 3 dimensions, and more importantly, I know that people argue about a 4th dimension to sustainability. So the 4th dimension I worked on is the cultural dimension. So I've done a paper on the role of culture in a sustainable built environment, where we look at issues like heritage buildings. So, Malaysia being a typical example with a lot of heritage sites, we need to protect these heritage sites. So the cultural dimension, where others sometimes, put it sociocultural, is very, very important. So I developed this framework where a sustainable built environment will include, urban retrofit, regeneration, and urban renewal, sustainable infrastructure, sustainable design and construction, and more importantly is the aspect we are looking at today, which is the sustainable cities and communities aspect of the coin. So a more sustainable built environment has got a huge impact on the quality of life. So if you have a built environment which is sustainable, biodiverse, embedded, then we are likely to improve the quality of life of the people, the health, and a lot of work or research has been done to link human well-being or people well-being and biodiversity. So improving the happiness, the well-being and of people, communities would depend on how we plan, we design and manage and maintain our built assets. So making sure that the design, the implementation, the planning and the construction of our built asset is embedded or is underpinned by a more sustainable principles and strategies is very, very important and very key. So looking at the big structure in terms of a more sustainable built environment, we will drill down deeper into cities and the challenges that cities bring and how we could turn these challenges into opportunities. In terms of population, more than half of the world's population, and importantly, the predicted or projected world population by 2050 is deemed to be around 6.5 billion. And with this number, it's estimated that 2/3 of that projected, which is about 3 billion, will be living in city slums. So there's a challenge there that, more importantly, if you look at the global south, and I keep mentioning countries in Africa, the like of, Johannesburg, Nairobi, Lagos, and if you look at Southeast Asia, Manila in Philippines, these are cities with a huge population living in slums. So whilst we advocate for a more sustainable city, we need to look at these, huge number of billions of people living in city slums. And how do we ensure that future cities will support the urban poor and slum dwellers? And even though cities occupy just 3% of the total world surface area in terms of the planet, it contributes to about 70% of the world global economy in terms of GDP. Energy consumption is well over 60%. So if you look at buildings consuming a lot of energy, buildings are the microscopic part of the cities, and greenhouse emission or carbon emission is as much as 70%. Contribution to global waste is as much as 70% as well. So the challenge in cities is huge. And how do we turn these challenges into opportunities? And like I said, cities can play a major role or a critical role towards the realization of the SDGs. And if we're able to develop, plan, and govern a more biodiverse city, then we could address these issues. We could minimize waste, we could address the carbon emission, as we all know that trees, absorb these carbon emissions. So if we have cities with green spaces, apart from reducing this carbon, we'll be improving the health being of the people in these cities and communities. And the impact of climate change is currently clear and is affecting everybody from the global north to the global south. Flooding in the areas, if you look at flooding in the global south, the cases of Africa, Nairobi, South Africa, the impact of flooding is huge. But it's not only, the developing countries or the poor countries that are suffering. If you look at the Western world, the Europe, winter is becoming severe each year. I mean, I've spent the last 20 years and 21 years in the UK, and it's clear that if I look about, 2000 versus 2020 or 2021, winter months have changed. When there's summer, the temperatures are high, and it does affect, well-being and our thermal comfort and ability to withstand and be resilient to these weathers, because in these cold climate places or countries, buildings are constructed with, maintaining or ensuring airtight in the sense that we are looking at avoiding, cold weather. So we are conserving energy. Every part of the building is sealed to ensure that we can prevent ourselves from the cold. So we don't build with heat or warm weather in mind. And as a result of the high temperatures coming in, flooding in most parts of UK, most parts of Europe are getting flooded. So the impact of climate change is clear and it's affecting everyone globally. And how do we then, address these effects? So we need to ensure that our planning, in terms of urban planning, city planning, we look at the long term. And a recent work by Professor Dixon at Reading University look at planning beyond 20 years and making sure that our infrastructure and governance systems are all, put into proper perspective, making sure that we have got green transport systems that have, with reduced carbon emission, good air quality, more resilient to climate change. Because if our infrastructure are not resilient to climate change, these will collapse. And we've seen these transport system infrastructures collapsing in flood as a result of the impact of climate change. So cities are expected to be the engine room for the global economy. And I think most of you will agree with me that the COVID has been a wake-up call for everybody about the impacts on how, if we don't develop more biodiversity, we will not be able to withstand any future pandemic. So we are looking at a more smart city where it's highly technological or has got more high technological capabilities, embedding the Internet of Things, big data, AI, digital twin. But again, once we are looking at issue of technology, embedding technology in the planning, the design of our cities, ensuring smart, buildings with the relevant technology to be able to be more sustainable, energy efficient, we need to again look at the global south, the developing countries. What is the situation there? Basic services. We are talking about people living in cities with slums. What they need is basic facilities, not maybe, should I say, artificial intelligence at this point. They need basic facilities like water, good drainage system, access to that. So there has been a number of global agreements and frameworks that is geared towards driving sustainable cities and communities. And these frameworks are Paris Agreement in 2015, which was agreed under the COP21. I say at the same time in 2015, the SDGs came into effect, and more importantly, the new urban agenda. So I'll kind of give you a brief overview of this global agreement, starting with the Paris Agreement, which was adopted in December 2015 by 196 countries and the EU. So that was an agreement in response to the threats of climate change. So the global community agreed to put measures in place to ensure that the global warming, the temperature we achieve below 2 degrees, or more importantly, effort should be put into limiting the increasing global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, below or above pre-industrial levels rather. And again, the SDG 13, which is looking at the climate change, seems to be linked with the remaining or a number of the 16 other SDGs. And to achieve that, cities can play a major role in terms of cutting down building energy consumptions through the design and construction of a more energy efficient buildings, developing efficient transport system, as I've said, in cities. So networking cities should be based on a more sustainable transport system. Decarbonizing the building and construction industry, because the industry has got huge negative impact on the environment. But if we're able to use the industry to drive the sustainable agenda, then we can decarbonize the building sector, which will result in the realization of the target that was set as part of the Paris Agreement. But let's put this into perspective. As part of the just ended COP26. So COP26 summit just ended in Glasgow in the UK. And the global community looked at the agreement that was put in place as part of the COP21 in Paris, which is the Paris Agreement. And studies have shown that if the commitment that was put in place as part of the Paris Agreement is just, if we stick to that without any further measures, we will not achieve the 1.5 degrees Celsius that we are looking at in terms of global warming. We will be reaching a dangerous 2.7 in terms of global warming. So that means that the global community is not doing enough, though we've had all this commitment, and I think you all agree with during the most developed countries like the US, who, during the Trump era, I'm not going to politics, but, they stayed away from the Paris Agreement. And these are the contributing countries into global warming. And if these people are not doing enough to address that, it's clear that we are not going to achieve that. So as part of COP26, the global community have put in place Glasgow Climate Pact, which is to reinforce the commitment that was taken as part of the Paris Agreement. Even though that pact is not legally binding, the global community have kind of agreed and recommit themselves to ensure that they put the right policies, the right systems in place. And research is showing that even before the COP26 pledge to do more to address issues of climate change, the projected greenhouse emission by 2020 was, at the moment was looking at 52.4 gigatons. And with the new pledges as part of the COP26, we could reduce this to 41.9, but it's a long way from the target of 26.6 gigatons, which is needed to achieve the target that we've set by 2030. And 2030 is just around the corner. We are now less than a decade to reach 2030. So all the targets that we've set for 2030, if we thought that 2030 would never come, is just around the corner as a reminder to the global community. But again, there has been a commitment by the community at COP26 to do more in terms of financial support for the poor countries to be able to switch to more green energy and to be able to cope with the impact of climate change. Moving on to the other global agreement, which is the Urban Agenda, again, was adopted in 2016, October at Habitat 3 conference, the Urban Agenda 3. So the UN produced a guideline which will look at or which will shape the urban environment for the next 20 years. And it's aimed at making sure cities should be transformed and be habitable. Cities should be more inclusive, should be safe, orderly, and more importantly, resilient to natural phenomena, flooding, the wildlife, or the wildfire, or the other natural disasters that we can think of, landslide. How do we make sure that our cities are resilient to these natural disasters and phenomena? So it lays out standards and principles in terms of how we plan, construct, and develop our cities. In terms of the governance systems, so legislations are being put in place, policies both at local level and urban planning policies across the globe should be in line with these standards to ensure that we achieve a more sustainable city that can be resilient to the impact of climate change. So concentrating more now on the third global framework, which is the SDGs, which links well with the conference today and the theme of my work, SDGs, biodiversity, and the cities. So I'm not going to say too much about SDGs. I know everybody at this conference have heard about SDGs and know about SDGs, which was adopted by 193 UN member states in 2015, consisting of 17 goals, supported by 169 targets and underpinned by 231 unique indicators. Emphasis is on unique indicators because the total number of indicators are more than 231. It's above 247. But because some indicators appear in more than 2 or 3 targets, if we count them as one, we get a unique 231. So the SDGs replace the MDGs. If you know about the Millennium Development Goals, that was only for developing countries. So I remember most countries in Africa, that was from 2000 to 2015, a 50-year cycle to look at the developing country. And people has been arguing that even with the Millennium Development Goals, which was only consistent of 8 goals, many countries couldn't meet the targets by 2015. So if we, it's good to be ambitious. I agree with you. The framers of the SDGs that we need to be ambitious, but setting 17 goals with 169 targets as versus 8 goals, which was hardly achieved. But the emphasis again, the Millennium Goals was for developing countries only, but the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, is for both developed and developing countries. So the action is looking at people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership among nations. So looking at Goal 11, which is cities and communities. Goal 11 consists of 10 targets and 14 indicators. So if you indicated that target 11.C has not got any indicator, and that there will be indicator as part of the 2025 comprehensive review. So we are looking at sustainable cities, which is aimed at making cities and human settlement more inclusive. And how do we make it more inclusive and resilient? Is having a more biodiverse city. Not just putting in new trees in the attempt to, or planting new trees, but even providing nest opportunities for biodiverse wildlife to flourish in these cities. And research have shown that even in cities, Amsterdam specifically, when they provided havens, nests for biodiverse, for wildlife, for birds, they were able to discover many species of birds that cannot be found even in forest areas. So within the city, it's not about providing green areas, by making sure that we conserve and preserve wildlife and biodiverse in our cities. So even in constructing infrastructure, because transport infrastructure, for example, has a huge impact on biodiversity. And if we are constructing transport infrastructure or any other infrastructure, how do we ensure that we minimize the impact on our biodiversity in attempt to do that?
I think Dr. Alex is experiencing some internet connection problems. So maybe we can wait a bit for him to come back on.
I couldn't even see that because I've got full screen. So I didn't notice the interruption. Is it okay now?
Yes, it's better now. Yep, we can see you.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
So we're looking at cities as Goal 11, where we are looking at targets like housing and basic services, cultural heritage, issue with green and public spaces, which links with the biodiversity aspect of city, embedding biodiversity, ensuring that there's a more biodiverse urban in our cities and communities. But the issue of cities Goal 11 links very well with a number or the rest of the SDGs. Because if we are able to achieve a more sustainable city or community, we are likely to reduce or provide access to food and be able to provide basic services to the inhabitants of these cities and communities. And therefore, we'll be able to achieve a number of other goals like reducing hunger, providing education, which is Goal 4, if we have basic access to education, access to drinking water in our cities. And that's why I was talking about urban slums in our cities. So there's a clear linkage between Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, and the rest of the SDGs. Upgrading urban slums into a more habitable, more sustainable community means that we can eliminate poverty, because people living in these urban slums are the poor. And improving good health and well-being is a way of reducing death due to air pollution. We can talk about clean energy, city-level waste management, achieving Goal 12 in terms of responsible consumption and production. Resilient to disaster will be helping us achieve Goal 13, which is climate action. And more importantly, protecting biodiversity, which is about Goal 15. So cities links very well, and that's why cities should be at the heart of the sustainable development agenda, and having a more biodiversity will help us achieve a lot of the SDGs that I've demonstrated. So I did mention about the challenge in the global south. So whilst we advocate for smart cities with more technology, there's a clear division between the rich north and the poor south. And that is the challenge we have. So if we talk about cities like London, Paris, New York, you can't compare with cities like Lagos and Nairobi and Manila. So we need to be mindful that whilst we attempt to look into a more sustainable, a more smart city, for me, I will advocate for a more biodiversity for these poor, because they can easily, adapt and be biodiverse in terms of the city development and planning. A city in Lagos can easily, adapt to biodiverse level rather than thinking about technology. And if we're able to produce, a city like Lagos becoming more biodiverse, we'll be able to address a lot of the issues facing such cities. Because cities in the global south have these kind of challenges, slums, the likes in South Africa, Johannesburg, Mumbai slums, poor drainage. So how do you think about issue of even smart technology in a city like the Mumbai slums, the Nairobi slums, the Johannesburg slums, where it lacks basic services, no drainage, poor air quality? I mean, the images tells it all, so I don't need to go into details about this. And what I'm advocating for is the embedding biodiversity in these cities to improve the quality of air and life for the inhabitants. And the current 2021 progress on the SDG show clearly that the developing countries, the global north, is ahead in terms of meeting the 2030 agenda. So if you look at the top 10 are mainly European countries, and they are mainly Scandinavian countries. So there's a lot to be learned from these countries. Even most of the likes of UK and the rest need to learn from the Scandinavians in the global world, because Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Slovenia, Estonia, these countries are at the top 3. They've taken more than half of the top 10 in terms of the progress towards achieving the SDGs. And this is the current, from the current dashboard of the, you can look at the progress of each country, how they are working towards each of the SDGs. And it shows the global divide, the north versus the south in terms of progress. But there's an important reflection, in the next slide. So if you look at the city level goal 11, you realize that most of the countries at the global south are having challenges. The key shows that the red are people having major challenges. So in terms of their attempts to achieve their set targets by 2030, the red countries are countries having major challenges towards the realization of the SDGs. And once again, it shows mostly countries in the global south still struggling. But to support my, should I say, advocacy to see that the global north use biodiversity as the effort to achieve the SDGs at the heart of all the SDG policy, is that current progress, once again, this is real life data. So everything I'm showing is exactly what you see when you go on the dashboard now. So it's not in a day, or a week even older. If you look at the SDG dashboard, towards the realization of goal 13, which is about climate change, you see that not all, but most of the countries at the global south, mostly in Africa, have achieved goal 13. Why are these countries struggling in terms of other goals, but they've all achieved goal 13? Because these countries are producing less in terms of carbon emission because they are not industrialized. So because these countries are not industrialized and they have got commitment to producing less carbon CO2 emissions, because they don't have huge factories like the other countries or developed countries will have in terms of their carbon emissions. And in terms of their transport, most of the activities are more sustainable. And if we're able to put biodiversity at the heart of these countries, they've got green forests, everything. And if we embed biodiversity in our cities, then we can achieve more in terms of the global south agenda towards the SDGs. But there was a major setback as a result of the COVID-19. Last year the COVID-19 set in, and cities became vulnerable and in terms of adapting. So there was a UN report talking about 90% of all COVID cases happening in cities. And that shows the level of inequalities in our cities. Because once again, talking about the informal settlement, the residents in the slums in those cities I've already mentioned, they lack the proper infrastructure, basic services. So when the COVID protocol was talking about social distancing, washing your hands every minute or so, people, inhabitants, residents in these cities don't have access to, proper sanitation, water. There's no proper waste collection systems in these cities. Access to basic health doesn't exist. So how do you expect slum dwellers in these cities to be able to, adhere to basic COVID principles or protocols? Because in most of these slums, they have communal waters, communal toilet facilities. Toilet facilities being used by hundreds of people would definitely, spread infection. So they were struggling. These cities were struggling to cope with the pandemic, with the COVID pandemic, as I've already mentioned, even in economic terms, because people living in these slums were not the typical people who were going or started moving work online. Everybody started working online and using, the Zooms and the Teams to start working. But residents in slums don't have the type of jobs that they can move their economic activity online. So the economic income was kind of cut off as a result of the pandemic. And we are looking at these kind of cities and how we can cope with future pandemics. So future-proofing cities to be able to withstand future pandemics means that we need to retrofit even our pavements. And this was clear in London, that even existing pavements, and somebody will say, okay, maybe it's London because you've got your cities, roads and pavements are too tiny. Unlike, other countries where roads are very big and infrastructure are built in that way. But there was clear that in order to be able to meet the protocols, social distancing, our even pavement had to be retrofits. We need to provide buildings in future buildings where we will have sanitation points that people can just go in and sanitize their hands in an attempt to withstand future pandemics. So a more sustainable future, a more biodiverse future that can withstand future pandemic need to have more public green spaces, more sustainable housing, so we can move people from the slums to at least basic and quality housing. Even our business activities should be more secular. Our business models should be more secular to be able to face future pandemics. More enhancing urban resilience, improving the quality air. If we want to improve the quality of air in our cities, we need to be more biodiverse. That's the only way. As basic common sense. Trees are the only natural ways and the easiest ways we can improve and enhance the quality of air because they will absorb all the CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. So a more future-proof city, a more biodiverse city is what we are advocating for with green spaces, planting trees, public spaces, again, linking it to the emphasis of COVID-19. It became apparent that, and I was a victim of that, using victim in quotes, because 2020 was a very challenging year because of the way our cities, I'm not talking about London, is being built. We all stay in 4 square houses. There's no public spaces, not like in other countries like, I'm originally from Africa. So we have huge compounds. So even if you are supposed to stay in-house, isolate, you still have a huge space and you can feel, you won't feel the impact more as it was in cities like, UK, where you are staying in the 4 corners, no public spaces, no green spaces to be able to have access to in most communities. So apart from that, we need also to look at existing stock buildings. Buildings that were built in, many years ago have to be retrofitted with more energy efficient components, solar panels, to make sure that we can reduce the energy consumption of these old buildings and making sure that if we reduce the energy consumption of buildings, then we will in turn reduce the consumption of energy at city level. So the future we want, we are talking about a future we want as part of the SDG, And we are saying that the future we want should be a more climate resilient city. And this is the kind of city we are looking at, Edmonton, Alberta. This is a typical biodiverse city. And if we're able to have cities, these cities will improve the quality of life. And when we talk about linking the well-being of inhabitants and residents with biodiversity, this is a typical case scenarios that we are looking for. I think most of us would love to live in places and communities like this, where we feel we can connect with the natural environment, more biodiverse environment, and city is what we are looking at. So whilst we advocate for a more smart technological city, for me, a more biodiverse city will add a lot of value to the sustainable agenda in the future we want. So in summary, we are saying that the sustainable built environment has a critical role to play in terms of achieving the SDGs. And the SDGs create a new direction for the global community, for businesses, for individuals, for the government level to be able to address the global community and achieve the sustainable agenda. And SDGs could be achieved through a more sustainable urbanization. We need to provide housing. Urbanization will go on, but we can still urbanize, but be more biodiverse urban or more sustainable urbanization, where we are not just building cities or not building new communities, but we are building new communities that are more biodiverse. In attempt even to build new community, we need to conserve the water bodies and the wildlife, and make sure that we create channels for these wildlife, these birds, by providing nests. And we can provide nests as part of even the roofing. If we are roofing all the eaves, we provide bird nest for them as inhabitants for some of these city birds to dwell in. So cities can be a massive agent in terms of having a positive change towards the SDGs. And how do we plan and how we build and how we govern our cities should be the way forward if we want to achieve a more sustainable city, a more biodiverse city. So actions at the city level is very, very important, especially when it comes to policies. Planning policies at city level should be more geared towards biodiversity. So a more biodiverse planning policy should be put in place at all city levels to ensure that we are only giving planning permission to new development that is taking account of the impact on those development on the environment, and then conserving and preserving biodiversity in attempt to create new communities and cities. And how could we do that? Because a more better developed city or more urban biodiversity could help us create jobs and offer better livelihood. It will improve a more social inclusion, because in any community where we have more open spaces, green spaces, everybody want to come to spend time at those green spaces. And the more people are coming together, we are improving social inclusion. We can promote the living standard and protect the local and regional ecosystem by embedding biodiversity in our cities and into our planning systems. And we'll be able to alleviate poverty and improve the quality of life of residents in these cities if we reduce carbon emission in our cities. So my message or my takeaway is that as we advocate for the SDGs and the principle under the SDGs, that we are not going to leave no one behind. We don't want, and even picking up from the last keynote speaker, that this shouldn't be just a lip service, and that's what the UN, everybody is talking. And when it comes to sustainability, everybody wants to raise the flag to say that they are sustainable. Nice reports, but in practice, they are not, doing things that will impact on the community, impact on the people. So to leave no one behind, we shouldn't leave any city or community behind. We shouldn't leave any place behind. If we leave these slums, if we leave these cities in the global south, then we are leaving people behind. So the agenda or the principle of leaving no one behind, we will definitely leave people behind, because we are leaving cities and communities behind. And cities and communities that can go with the SDGs has to be cities that's well embedded with biodiversity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that speech. I think it is indeed very thought-provoking, particularly about how to foolproof our cities for the current and future circumstances that we may experience. And I also absolutely love the idea of making more green spaces in the city and the incorporation of more biodiversity in the cities through sustainable urbanization. And I think your last tagline really hits close to heart because there's this policy in the US, no child left behind. So by you saying no cities left behind is similar to that, has a similar vibe to it. And I absolutely love that. Thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I also think that everyone agrees with me that your speech has given us something to think about, especially about how we can shape future cities alongside biodiversity and making it flourish, particularly for the future generation.
That's right. That's right. So I liked your last thing you talked about. Everybody talking about leaving no child behind. But these children are living in slums. And if we leave those slums behind, we are leaving those children behind.
Exactly. It's all interconnected. That's why I think it just fits perfectly into the whole ecosystem that we have. So that's wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. With the end of the second keynote speaker, I am going to open the session now for a panel Q&A session. So participants may post questions in the chat box or unmute your mic and ask your questions directly. So if you have a specific speaker you want to address your question to, you may mention their name specifically. Otherwise, we welcome the speakers to pick up and answer the question accordingly. So I will first start with some of the leftover questions from the previous session. So we have one live question from Dr. Asmida. So Dr. Asmida, can you please unmute your mic and ask your question?
Dr. Nuraza, thank you. First of all, thank you, Dr. Alex, for your talk. Okay, just give me a few seconds. All right. I have a question for Dato Latif. Thank you so much, Dato Latif, for a very insightful talk just now. It was great to hear from you again, Dato. Thank you for being with us. All right, based on your talk, we recognize that the strategies and also steps to be taken by the federal and also the states to further strengthen SDG in our community. Dato, at the university level, the majority of our students are currently more interested to learn or to aim to work in the field of applied biology related to viruses and bacteria in the lab, compared to learning or working in the forest to study natural biology. So this is what we have, this is what we understand for now. My question is, Dato, what can we do to change this long-standing perception within our young generations? Because as an ecologist, I would love to see more students opting for this field. So do you have any suggestions or recommendations on what we as a lecturer or as a university can do to cultivate, the love for the nature and to work in this field?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Asmida. All sciences, all biology are important. What makes people be more selective in their career, either to be a lab-based biologist, such as microbiologist, biochemist, molecular biologist, or field-based biologist, like ecologist, plant taxonomy, animal taxonomy. It has got to do with, one, how they were exposed to when they were in school and when they were in the universities. Here, I feel strongly the teachers and the lecturers like us can play a very important role in creating the interest in enticing them to do whatever they do. But we cannot force anybody into doing what they don't want to do. To be honest, I have been cheated. I call it cheated, tipu, by my lecturers into doing botany, which I did not regret it at all. From 1972 until now, I have been cheated by my mentor. So sometimes you have got to be fair to students to choose whatever they like, but sometimes it did work to cheat students into doing what you think is best. You know, of course, if I can cheat you all, do taxonomy, do botany, because that is the best thing in the world. But be democratic, be fair, and teachers in school, lecturers like us in the university, can really play a model, can really play the role of directing or channeling their interest into something either lab-based or field-based. But if you ask me, I think the best of both worlds is to be, a person in the field, like nature, like fresh air, and also spend some time, maybe 30% to 40% in the lab doing, what I consider non-field based. So be around them, entice your student to be able to visualize not only under the microscope, not only in the test tube, but in the wide world outside there, the real thing, the living thing, the moving thing, the green color of the leaf, not the one in the herbarium. The jumping of a squirrel, not visualizing through what I consider IT simulation work, that kind of thing. So I must say once again, combine both, be in the field, collect the specimen, and be in the lab to study the specimen, and you may be able to enjoy. So try to keep your student into doing both, best of the both worlds. Be a naturalist, be what I can consider experimental or applied biologist. They won't regret it, definitely. They won't regret it. Thank you.
Can I add something to that comment, if you don't mind, from a different perspective?
Sure, Dr. Alex.
Okay, so one thing that I also believe in terms of encouraging students with issue of sustainability, whichever angle you take it, is to look at the issue of sustainability skills. So sustainability skills and what I call sustainability literacy is becoming a core skills, a core requirement. So in future, it becoming like teamwork, like interpersonal skills, communication skills, sustainability skills is becoming part of those transferable skills that will be required for employment in the future. So how do we as educators, as educational institutions, prepare the future graduates to have those skills? Whatever course they are pursuing, whether it's in engineering, it's in biology, it's in business, sustainability skills should be a component of that curriculum. We should make sure that either there's a standalone course as part of every curriculum, whichever course every student is pursuing, engineering, business, chemistry, there should be a component, either a standalone or an embedded course within the curriculum that they will talk about issue of sustainability, looking at the environmental, the social, and economic. So even not just waiting until even they get to higher education, at the primary school level, we should inculcate the habit of sustainability. It can take various forms, like the professor was talking about, ensuring that the primary school children get outside to explore our nature, and they can learn sustainability in so many ways. So by the time they get into university, higher education, and becoming our future leaders, they have got the feel, the understanding about the love for nature, the love for sustainability principles, and they will have those skills and knowledge to be able to contribute to the world we want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex. And I hope Dr. Asmida, both of the speakers have managed to answer your question in the best way possible, I think. So we do have another question in the chat box. So this is from Nur Kursina. Assalamualaikum and good day all. I'm Dr. Kursina from FPA. So Professor, I think this was directed to Prof. Latif before. What is your opinion on biodiversity evolution in Malaysia for many years in the future, considering the issues on climate change, raise of water level that affected peatland, especially in Sarawak, as well as the exposure of nature species that is well reserved to the human activities, such as changes of cyclic pattern by animals due to interruption of human? Thank you.
Oh, this is a very tough question. Put it this way, our planet, our Asia, our Malaysia is changing. You know, from the days of Sunderland until now, the shoreline has changed, the landscape has changed, the ecosystem habitat has changed. I think there was a map shown by Professor Nazik with regard to the forest change in Peninsular Malaysia from 3 interval years. We cannot go against those changes. Either they are naturally induced or more so now human induced. Human brought these changes. Likewise, the species are changing, are speciating, are evolving into things different. Just like your COVID-19, I think it has mutated and now there are so many variants. Our genetic material are also changing. But sadly, and no, while these are changing naturally and human-induced, other factors are also operating. You did mention climate change. You did mention, things that become high level rise, sea level rise, and you know what's happening these days. So it is happening in parallel. You know, we can't change both. We can't change any one of them. But I'm talking about human. If human can change things, human can change for the better. So our leaders, you know, you mentioned it, the 10 richest country in the world, the 20 richest country in the world, United Nations, the ASEAN, they have got platform to discuss, to bring changes. But then again, you know, it is not as easy as that. You know, our Prime Minister promised to I would say, decrease the carbon emission, you know, and with what I consider irrelevant demand. Give us technology, give us money, then we'll do it. I mean, what is this? Don't be beggars to the developed countries. Give us money, give us technology. I think we have got enough skill, enough knowledge to innovate, to adapt, to take action, to reduce whatever we want to reduce to address these issues of climate change or carbon emission. We got to do it at home. Nobody will come and do for us. You know, I like the discussion brought by Dr. Alex Opuku with regard to, you know, cities, future cities must have biodiversity, must have vegetation, must have forests within it in order to enrich the well-being of the city folks. But I'm thinking of also the rural areas which are being transformed. Not the rural areas of 1920s anymore. The rural areas, for example, in Malaysia, has changed so much. We have lost our original vegetation, original flora and fauna, we have been substituting with new birds, new insect into our surrounding. Things of the areas between rural and city areas. So once again, as I said, naturally they are changing. Nature director, and what I'm afraid now is the speed, the way human, people like you and me are bringing changes much to the dislike of ourselves. Jolly good. We wanted to plant 100 million of trees in Malaysia. Good. Plant them. Don't talk. Plant them. I think the former minister, Ungah, wanted or promised that. It didn't work. Now the new minister promised, plant them. Don't talk. Rehabilitate the mangrove. Don't talk. That is my message, That's why charity always is brought from home, So we cannot expect people to give us, charity all the time. We've got to do it. So as teachers, you have the role to play, as Dr. Alex said just now. You have got to nurture the love for biod, the love for pristineness, the love for clean air, And I think you and I can help to promulgate ideas, awareness that we can do this without, I would say, the Prime Minister went to Copenhagen and promised something which he couldn't do it. That's not the way, a nation is built. The nation is built on the willpower of the people to bring changes like you and me. I may sound like a politician, but I'm not. It's just that I'm emotionally motivated to change, the world we live in, just like Alex said just now, to a planet, to a city that we all can look after our well-being in a most comfortable manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Latif. Start from home so that start small, and then become bigger when everyone does it. I love the idea. All right, wonderful. We have a live question from our live audience, and I would like to invite Dr. Nur Azian to pose a question.
Hi, Dr. Alex. Dengar tak suara? Hi, Dr. Alex.
Hi, sorry, I was muted.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you very much for being with us today. Welcome to Malaysia virtually. Although I know, but you are a student examiner with one of the local university here. Okay, one question, a very straight question, a very simple question, but this has always been the first questions that comes to mind when we talk about sustainable building, sustainable infrastructure, and etc. So as a QS, I am also a QS. Do sustainable building cost more? Very simple question for a QS.
Yes, the answer is yes in terms of the initial capital cost. So initial capital cost of most sustainable projects will cost slightly more, but I will even say slightly, because when you put into perspective, sometimes the cost difference between a normal project and a more sustainable project is not that much. But how do we convince our clients to go into a more sustainable project, which is costing more, is to talk about the issue of life cycle costing. So clients don't look at what they are just paying today. But if you look at the whole life cost of the built assets, if I pay extra more today, what is the payback? If I put solar panels, definitely solar panels will cost extra pounds or extra dollars. But over the lifespan of the built assets, 25 years, 35 years, I will be able to make savings on my energy costing. So there's always a payback, and your payback is even more than your capital cost. So what I always advocate is that you need to make sure that clients understand that if they pay just a little more today, they will make huge savings over the lifespan of the built assets. So technically the answer is that more sustainable projects will cost extra more in terms of the initial capital cost. But over the whole life of the built assets, you make huge savings, because if you put a more energy efficient, insulated walls, whatever it is, technology that you put in, you'll be making savings of your energy. If you are heating water, if you are harvesting rainwater, as for flushing toilets or using for your WC, that means, rainwater harvesting as part of your design, as part of the sustainable project, will be extra big, because you may need a lot of, let's say, rain gutters and stuff to harvest this. So your normal design may have 2 meters of rain gutter, but if you are going to harvesting, we may spend extra more. But over 25 years, you may not pay water rent, bill for water for your flushing and for your cooking and stuff, because you are able to harvest rainwater. So sorry for the long answer, but the point is, if we look at whole life costing, then
because that has always been the biggest hurdle for us in the construction industry, to convince our client to invest on the sustainable building, because Malaysia is still a developing country, so it is not easy for us to convince, because people has always look at the initial cost compared to the LCC. So any opinion in order for us to create an awareness to the client, or I don't think that they are well educated enough, but then they are still reluctant to invest in this kind of building.
Yeah, I think
how many benefits that we have by having this kind of sustainable building, but then still cost still being the first thing that the client will look at.
What I would say is human nature. No matter how educated they are, no matter how much they know about sustainability, they will think about their interest first. Yeah. And why will I invest now if I haven't got a long-term interest in the built assets? So clients who has got long-term interest in any built assets won't care about investing more in terms of capital cost. Because if university, hospital, government agency has got long-term interest in the infrastructure, because they are going to maintain it. So in terms of cleaning cost, maintenance cost, they are going to bear it. So that client will be happy to spend more to save later. But developers will never. Developers are in for business. They are in for the profit. They are just building and selling. So they look at, why should I spend more? And people may not even be ready to pay for the full cost of a more sustainable building. But any client with a long-term interest in the built assets, like government agencies or even individuals, because if I'm going to live in a house for the next 30 years, I want to not look at how much I'm paying today, but what will be my maintenance cost, what will be my energy cost, and all that kind of stuff. So our interest is based on our commitment in terms of whether we will be living in that built asset, or we are just building and selling it and moving on.
I agree. Thank you very much, Dr. Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alex, for that excellent answer. So we have 2 more questions in the chat box. The first question is from Muhammad Idham. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good day to all. So the question is, how youth in Malaysia can be the front runner in SDGs implementation and supporting the SDGs progress in the country? Muhammad Idham is from UPM. So I'm opening the floor to any of the speakers to pick up this question. So how do we get youths in Malaysia to become front runners of SDG implementation?
The flag bearer, this is not a question of competition. It is a question of looking inward, as a nation. What do we want? What do we want to do? I think it's a question which not only the politician must be able to answer, but the whole population. What do we really want? To to be a developed country, to be a high income country, and blah, 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 blah. It's just, to put it in perspective, what do we really want? If I'm the Prime Minister, then I'll say, let's do it. But I'm not. It's just like what the analogy Prof. Nazib said just now. If the whole planet is a village of 100, that's the kind of thing. I wish, some member of parliament are listening to our discussion. We must decide, what do we really want to survive in a climate change scenario, to survive in a world that is changing so fast. What do we really want? There's so many models to emulate. Just like during the COVID-19, I think the New Zealand model is good to emulate. So to answer your question, it's really to ask ourselves, what do we really want? If I want pizza, then I must take my phone and order pizza. If I want to be an ecologist, then I must do a second degree or third degree in ecology. It's a question of looking at ourselves internally, inside out. Not what do politicians want? What do the whole world want? I think that is it's not the way a nation should be strive for. So I wish our ministers, our people who make the decision, decide for themselves. I just read just now. I just read a statement by a minister in environment, blaming cutting of forest for the depletion of tiger. Wan Junaidi. Crazy. It got nothing to do with tebang pokok harimau hilang. You ganggu habitat harimau sebenarnya. Jangan pergi ganggu tebang pokok di habitat harimau. You can tebang pokok tempat tak ada harimau. So this is the kind of things, I would, like to tell the people who make decision, what do we want? The minister launched SDGs, I think 3 years ago. And now it has become all quiet across the front. This is not the way a nation should strive for. Again, I sound like a politician. Forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. No, I mean, you're not a politician, but I know you're very much invested in this notion of balancing out our biodiversity. So, it's excellent that at least someone is saying something and being vocal about it.
Dr. Raza, if I may add.
Yes, please, Doctor.
Thank you. I totally agree with Dato Latif. If we were serious about implementing SDG in the country, we have to be serious. I was there in 2019 when the Prime Minister then launched the SDG in the KLCC. I remember vividly during that time. What I'm trying to say is, if we are serious, regardless who's managing the country, I mean, who's the top leader of the country, this agenda must go on. Yes, it was really, when it was first launched, it's a lot of strategy, a lot of commitment that the government would like to make. But then, it seems that now it's quiet. I think it's high time, if we are serious about making Malaysia to be really committed in implementing SDG, it has to be from the top, because then if it will trickle down to the government, the organization, and put some budget on it, I think it will work. Yeah, there's a simple question, a simple answer from me. Thank you.
Yes, definitely, Prof. And I think, we have to make do with all this hangat-hangat tai ayam thingy and start putting in action, start putting in our own effort into it. And I do like that you mentioned it has to start from the top, and there has to be a driver for it. It's no more just lip service, but it's action. All right. So moving on to the next question. This is directed to Dr. Alex from Dr. Iqbal. So her question is, cities and biodiverse cities have been beautifully put forth. So various interconnections between policymakers, pacts, and pledges have been proposed. Here's what she thinks. So we can achieve an active intervention and a greater sensibility among our citizens, which may be the only way to enable and revitalize top-down actions, making a difference from the bottom. So can reversing the concept like this be an effective way to fulfill the SDGs, as some good evidence has been shown in Japanese territory, where they reconnect people with nature through citizen-based urban forest framework? What do you think the level of receptivity of this method is in other regions?
Yeah, thank you for that interesting question. I think advocating for bottom-up or kind of citizen level is something that will be very good, because for me, I believe that even in the Western world, people are becoming more receptive to taking, I think, okay, let me put it this way. The COVID has been a wake-up call for even individuals to take good care of themselves. So any action from the government where they are part of the whole narrative. So instead of, and especially in the Western world, when it's coming from government imposed, people become resilient or resistant to such policies. But when they feel they are part of the policy direction, I think people, are more receptive to that kind of framework. So I will agree with that kind of framework where the citizens themselves are part of the advocates. And if they know the benefits of a more biodiverse, any angle of the sustainability agenda, whether it's about climate change, if they know how their actions and inaction will affect themselves, then they will be part of any activity. They won't even wait for government policies or government direction. Communities will come together. Communities will look at their corner and start maybe planting trees, putting measures to correct waste in their communities. Because they know that if they leave the waste there and there's flooding, they will be the first people to be affected by the flood than the government up, in wherever they may be. So putting the people at the center, citizens, as you may term it, more citizen-centered, citizen-focused, more approach will be the best way forward in addressing the SDGs. And I think even most of the UN policies look at not just allowing, government level or at national level, but involving all the stakeholders in the SDG agenda. Look at the communities, businesses, NGOs. So we as citizens has got a role to play in achieving the SDGs. And if we know the impact of our inactions or actions on either affecting ourselves, improving the way we achieve the SDGs, I believe that we should be at the center of the drive to achieve the SDGs rather than relying on only government, top down policies, and when people feel that it's being imposed on them. And I think you've seen a lot of countries where even the vaccination, we all know that we need to get a vaccination, but people are in the streets, fighting police, saying that no, they are not going to, it's their human right, they are not going to vaccinate and all that. But when the citizens believe the benefits of engaging with the SDGs, they will not even feel that it's being imposed on them, and they will be part and parcel of activities that will help accelerate the realization of the SDGs.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Alex. I hope, Dr. Iqbal, your question was answered. Okay, so now we're looking at whether there are any more questions from the live participants, or I don't see any questions in the chat box anymore. So let's open the floor for any more live questions. You can just unmute your mic and then introduce yourself and ask your question. No more, it seems. I think everyone is pretty much still trying to digest what they've heard for today, which in a way is very good because you've got everyone's mind thinking about what we're going to do in terms of balancing biodiversity and also the way we live in our current situation today. So if there are no more questions, I think we can let the speakers rest for a bit and we will proceed with the last agenda in the morning session. So first and foremost, allow me to thank you everyone, participants and also all the respected panel speakers for engaging, particularly in the last hour in a discussion over the topic that we are discussing today. And I think the takeaway note is that it's in creating a more sustainable environment. It requires concerted effort. It is not a one-man show. We need everyone on board with the idea of pushing the 17 SDGs and taking action instead of just talking, whether it is based on our own small community, our own small family, or in our community, or even in a larger scale. So it's actually a concerted effort, not a one-man show. All right, so before we take a break for lunch and also for afternoon prayers, I would like to request for those present in the opening session to kindly fill in the attendance form via the link provided in the chat box, shared by our technical team. And I would also like to request everyone to kindly switch on their cameras for a group photo session to indicate the end of this morning session. So let's show our faces here. Okay, so I hope the technical team is ready to snap a photo of everyone.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's all. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, technical team. And thank you everyone for your cooperation. So we will now break for lunch and continue with our parallel session at 2 p.m. So a gentle reminder to the participants and also the moderators of the parallel session, please be ready in the breakout room 15 minutes before the session starts to avoid any unnecessary delays. So the link to your session has been emailed to you prior to the conference. And if you are unsure where to go, please get in touch with our secretariat. Their contact details can be found in the chat box. So thank you again, everyone, for your attention and engagement for the past 3.5 hours almost. So signing off from MC duty, I wish you a good lunch break and I look forward to seeing you again during the parallel session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, respected speakers.